Well, it's now 10:03. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. This is the Build America, Buy America Act Overview and Impact webinar. We're going to be going over specifically how it's going to affect our home and NHTF programs. All right. So first off, we're going to start with what is BABA. The Build America, Buy America Act, also known as BABA, requires all federally funded infrastructure developments to use materials that are sourced and produced from within the United States. This includes all construction, alteration, maintenance, and repair work done with federal funds. HUD further dictated that all housing developments undertaken with federal funds are going to be considered infrastructure. Applicable materials under BABA include iron, steel, construction material, and all other manufactured products. All right. So some example of BABA activities include the rehabilitation of a building and real property, new construction of single and multifamily housing units, construction of public facilities, streets, sidewalks, neighborhood centers, and building conversion, utilities installation and water systems, broadband and transportation infrastructure. Some non-BABA activities, this is not an inclusive list, but would include land acquisition, relocation and demolition, down payment assistance, shelter and public facility operations, supportive services, short-term rent payments to prevent homelessness, administrative activities, and disaster and emergency response. Build America, Buy America, specifically as it relates to the home and NHTF awardees. BABA applies to all funds that were obligated by HUD on or after August 23rd of 2024. All awards in the home and NHTF programs made on or after the September 2024 board meeting date will be subject to BABA requirements. Prior years of obligated funds are not subject to BABA. So if you have an outstanding contract that used 2023 funds, BABA will not apply to your project. If a development receives funds from multiple years allocations, the whole development must be treated as BABA compliant. So if you receive some 2023 dollars and some 2024 dollars, unfortunately, the whole program has to be compliant. Federally funded infrastructure programs. So which programs are not affected by BABA? This is going to be the Home ARP, the Housing Stability Program, and the Affordable Housing Tax Credits. However, it should be noted, if a development has multiple funding sources, such as National Housing Trust Fund and low-income housing tax credits, the whole development must be compliant. Product classifications. Items can only be classified as one of the classifications under the BABA Act. These classifications are iron and steel, construction materials, or manufactured products. Classifications should be made based upon how the item arrives at the job site. For example, a window can have a steel frame, but the product that arrives is still a window. A window is considered a manufactured product. Iron and steel are products that are made predominantly out of iron and steel. This means that at least 50% of the total cost of the item can be directly contributed to iron and steel. All manufacturing processes, starting with the initial melting stage and continuing through the application of coatings, must occur within the United States in order for a product to be BABA compliant. Some examples of iron and steel products would be nails and screws, steel beams, rebar, tension cables, stainless steel plating or fixtures, wrought iron fixtures or fencing, mild alloy or carbon steels. Construction materials. Construction materials are materials or supplies that are used in the construction process. Only the following items are considered construction materials. These are non-ferrous metals such as aluminum, copper, lead, nickel, tin, titanium, zinc, and copper alloys. Lumber, all plastic and polymer made materials, plate glass, fiber optic cables, drywall, and engineered wood. All the manufacturing processes for construction materials must occur inside of the United States. Separate is manufactured products. Manufactured products are materials processed into a specific form or shape, or materials combined with other items to create a product with different properties. Some examples would be composite building materials, windows, concretes, brick, siding, and roofing materials. For manufactured products to be BABA compliant, the final product must be manufactured within the United States, and at least 55% of the cost of the product must cover components mined, produced, or manufactured from within the United States. Some example of non-BABA products would be temporary items that will be removed before the development is complete, such as scaffolding, ladders, and tools. Minor additions of materials such as bonding agents or plumber's tapes on pipes, and equipment and furnishings. BABA is subject to several waivers that can be easily split into two groups. That's the ones that OHFA can approve and the ones that HUD have to approve. The waivers that OHFA can approve are exigent circumstances, small grants, and de minimis, and then HUD must approve all development-specific waivers. Exigent circumstance waiver is applicable for properties that need rapid action to sustain human life or the safety of the property of the residents or community. Some examples would be using home funds to repair a property that experienced a hot water pipe bursting in the middle of winter, or CBDG funds that are used to repair public facilities made structurally unsound by a tornado. This waiver will not be available after November 23rd, 2027. The small grant waiver. This waiver is available if the total development cost does not exceed $250,000. If the waiver is given, but the total expenses later exceed the waiver maximum, the development would no longer be eligible for the waiver, and therefore the development would be non-compliant. Non-compliant developments are subject to recapture by HUD. So developments close to this threshold are not recommended to use this waiver. It is not available after November 23rd, 2027. Okay. Next is the de minimis waiver. BABA requirements do not apply for a de minimis portion of an infrastructure development, meaning a cumulative total of no more than 5% of the total cost can be contributed to iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials. Total development costs under this waiver cannot exceed $1 million. If a waiver is given, but the total expenses later exceed the waiver maximum, or the cost of eligible items later exceeds the 5%, development would no longer be eligible for the waiver and therefore would be non-compliant. This waiver will not be available after November 23rd, 2027. So here's some examples of the small grant and de minimis waiver. Example number 1, a developer is rehabilitating an owner-occupied home. The development is receiving $50,000 in home funds to repair the roof and update the home heating system. Because the total development cost does not exceed $250,000, a small grant waiver could apply. Another example would be a developer buys a newly constructed home with intention of selling it at a discount to a qualified home buyer. The total development will cost $300,000. 5% of the total development cost is $15,000. The applicant agrees to install a storm shelter and LED light fixtures in the home. The storm shelter costs $5,000 and the lighting structures cost $1,000, meaning that the total cost of applicable materials is $6,000, which is below the 5% threshold. A de minimis waiver could apply. So what documentation are required for these waivers? On the small grant waiver, a request has to be submitted in writing to OHFA staff. The staff must respond and approve the waiver in writing in order for it to be in effect. The OHFA board resolution and the written agreement are sufficient documentation for the small grant waiver. For the de minimis waiver, a request has to be submitted in writing to OHFA staff. Staff must respond and approve the waiver in writing for it to be in effect. De minimis documentation will include an accurate budget for the development with exact cost for all BABA applicable items. Next, you get into development-specific waivers. These are the ones that must be approved by HUD. There are 3 types of development-specific waivers. The first is public interest, which states that abiding by BABA would be inconsistent with the public interest. The non-availability waiver, which states that BABA-covered products are not produced in the United States in a sufficient quantity or in a satisfactory quality to meet construction needs. Or the unreasonable cost waiver, which states that domestically produced covered products would increase the total development cost by more than 25%. All project-specific waivers must be submitted to OHFA and HUD for review. HUD requires all development-specific waivers requests come directly from OHFA. Waivers will be subject to a public comment period and must be approved by the Office of Management and Budgets at HUD. All work on the development must stop while a waiver is being considered. Development-specific waivers continued. Waivers are development and material specific. If a builder has 2 developments underway and both run into the same unreasonable cost issue, 2 waivers with documentation must be submitted, 1 for each development. If 2 builders in the same region run into the same unavailability issue, 2 waivers with documentation must be submitted, 1 for each builder. If a developer notices a lack of available windows and nails, 2 waivers must be submitted, 1 for each item that is not available. Waivers must be submitted for each type of federal funding received. If a development is built with home and NHTF funds, 2 waivers will need to be submitted, 1 for each program. If you have a development with home and LIHTC funds, but you're only using the home funds for land acquisition, the whole development must still be BABA compliant. So if you run into a lack of BABA acceptable windows, a waiver must still be submitted. At the time of this webinar, we have discussed with some other housing authorities throughout the United States, and none of them have had any of their waivers approved by HUD at this time. So we're going to try to avoid using these as much as possible. Some documentation requirements. For public interest waivers, you must provide a signed letter, petition, or poll that states there is a genuine conflict of public interest in complying with BABA. For non-availability waivers, applicants should submit letters or out-of-stock notices from suppliers advising that a product is not available. For unreasonable cost waivers, please submit quotes from local producers showing that the cost of incorporating a domestically made product would increase the total development cost by more than 25%. This should also include some mock budgets which reflect the cost increases. All documentation should reflect a genuine effort to meet BABA requirements and clearly identify why compliance is not feasible. So how will OHFA be complying with BABA? Written agreements starting with the September 2024 awards will be amended to include language that require applicants to comply with BABA. Though this language is not finalized at this time, it will read something like the following. The grantee must comply with the requirements of the Build America Buy America Act, or BABA, under 41 U.S.C. 8301 notes, and all applicable rules and notices, as may be amended, if applicable to the grantee's infrastructure development. Grantees must also include BABA language in all their contracts for construction and purchase orders, stating that they can only use and acquire products manufactured and sourced from within the United States. An affidavit will also be incorporated into the home and NHTF applications. This affidavit will include a certification of understanding that BABA applies to a development, a certification that an applicant will save digitally or physically all purchase orders and contracts that contain or should contain BABA language, and a location where the applicant can elect if a small grant or de minimis waiver may apply to their project. Likewise, documentation that products are appropriately sourced must be included with construction reimbursement requests going forward if you have a BABA applicable project. This documentation can include the following: BABA compliant contracts and purchase orders, Made in America stickers, country of origin info placed on websites where products are ordered, country of origin information listed on packaging, signed and dated letters provided by suppliers confirming the origin of products provided by a producer. OHFA will be working with our inspectors to verify materials incorporated into the development are appropriately sourced from within the United States. This will include inspectors looking for Made in America or country of origin stamps, packaging, or information on products that have been delivered to the construction site when they go out to inspect. All right, do we have any questions? One second. Q&A. Here we go. Can you please share the slide deck with attendees? Yes, this slide deck is going to be available on OHFA's website after the webinar is concluded. It will be both the slide deck and a recording of the webinar. Just to answer a question that we had come up through email last week, if you have a home or NHTF project that later requires maintenance, such as you had a hailstorm that broke half the windows that you had to replace, as long as you are not using federal funds to replace the windows, they do not have to be BABA compliant. What if we can't figure out where products come from? Unfortunately, HUD said that we have to document where all products come from or originate, which means that if we cannot verify where a product comes from, we are unable to use it in the project. Okay. If we know at the time of application that we will need a de minimis waiver, can we submit the request after the final OHFA review report? Yes, you can submit the request, preferably after it's been awarded by our board. However, the affidavit which we'll be incorporating into the application will have a spot for applicants to advise if they believe the de minimis waiver or the small grants waiver will apply to their project. All right. Well, I'm going to wait a couple more minutes to see if any more questions come in. But if not, I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Please be sure to contact staff, either myself, Emily Myers, or Corey Borneman, if you have any additional questions about how this is going to operate or look. All right. What if BABA increases our cost/budget? So BABA will very likely increase the cost of a project. Many of our projects are hemmed in by the home maximum subsidy limit, which we will not be able to exceed. However, BABA requirements can only be waived if it shows a significant increase in project cost. HUD says a significant increase in project cost is a 25 increase of total project costs. So unfortunately, some of them will just increase. All right. Will HUD increase limits to account for BABA? That is something that will be done by the HUD main office if they do so. At this point in time, they have not released any increased limits which will reflect BABA costs. Will OHFA require specific lists or forms for documenting BABA covered products? At this point in time, we are not requiring a specific list or form to document BABA products. However, as previously mentioned on one of the slides, documentation will have to be provided whenever you put in your request for reimbursement that shows that the products purchased were BABA compliant or eligible. This can be letters from the producer saying that things were produced properly inside the United States, country of origin stickers, product packaging, photos of those. We are, at this point in time, do not have a specific form. Right. Anybody else? Any additional questions? All right. Well, as I mentioned, the slide deck and presentation will be put on OHFA's website probably later today. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to staff. And have a good rest of your day. Thank you.